Hello everyone, welcome to my third game in the International Championship. This is a fake three-player game against PhiTrigger and Mushan. I stated in my last video, Mushan actually started to time out in some of his games, so he has decided to resign as soon as possible in all of his remaining games. So this just ends up being a two-player game, me against PhiTrigger. Prior to this game's completion, the results are still the same at the end of my last video. Only 3 games have been finished beforehand, so we kind of know the standings here. Here, Shopko is in first with 8 points. I have 7 with I'm second with 7 points, and Vivi has 5 points, but only 1 game completed at the time. But anyways, let's just jump right into the current game. Starting from H3 leaders, you can see that there's a lot of lab emphasis with Steve Jobs, Einstein, Meyer, and Gates. Very slight culture support with Marlene and Hollywood. Then a little bit of colonization as well with Mandela, Red Cross. Sue's in the game, Gandhi's here as well, but there isn't like a Shakespeare that needs to protect a culture lead. There's a Bach that can go into Marlene, and I guess if you do develop a culture lead with Bach, you can go into Gandhi. But for the most part, it does seem to be like a very aggressive military leaders with military actions, or high science with Newton Nobel, or really high production with Watt Railroad combination. Looking at age 1, there's not a lot of aggressiveness here. There's no Joan, there's no Zizka. There's Barbarossa, there's Khan, so there's a little bit of strength support, but there's also some pretty decent colonization with Columbus, Isabella, Barbarossa, Eleanor, and some utility leaders in Nostradamus, Michelangelo. In the age A, there is Sun Tzu with Colossus, so it's very possible that you can do some kind of very heavy colonization strategy. But yeah, just to look out for in that line. But anyways, let's just get right into the first turn. We can see that PhiTrigger decided to take Roman roads here. I don't think either of us knew at the time that Mushan was going to resign this game, so definitely made some picks based off of thinking that this is going to be a 3-player game. Otherwise, I think it's very possible that Acropolis might have been more highly valued, and he might have wanted to take a leader instead with the hope of getting Acropolis. Yeah. Not 100% sure, but I mean, Roman Road's also very solid. And maybe if he didn't know that it was a 3-player game, maybe he thought I would just take or he knew that it was a 2-player game, maybe he thought I would just take the Acropolis on 3 civil actions here. Anyways, Mushan does some moves. I'm not sure if he timed out at this point in his other games. I did see that he tried to play through some of them, but at some point in H1 he just wasn't able to keep up and he lost. So I wasn't sure that he was. I don't think I knew that he was gonna quit at this time. So I end up taking Boudica and Colosseum. Kind of arguable if I should take Boudica or not. There is Alexander, so it's possible that I get a really bad first trigger. And honestly, I didn't really consider that when I made this play. Probably better is just to take Sun Tzu. It makes sense. Coming from my perspective of thinking that this is going to be a 3-player game. But, my wonder does have a happy face, so it's possible that the extra population going into Warrior, I can still build a lab out somewhere if I'm able to finish this Coliseum quickly. So PhiTrigger, he does take Alex, so it does hurt my Boudica part, assuming that he keeps Alex the first or on turn 3. And then kind of does normal stuff, but he takes his urban growth, and I kind of think you're supposed to just increase your population. I've talked about this before in my other games, which had Alex, which were you shouldn't really take extra cards when you have Alex and Roman roads. Each of these take an extra civil action compared to a lot of the Wonder leader combinations, and you really need to focus and be like, just don't spend time taking yellow cards. Don't take cards on for 2 or 3 civil actions. Just play your board, develop it, and then after you've built Roman roads, after you built your lab, after you've increased pop, then you can start thinking about taking cards. And then Mushan still can't resign because there's no political action. So he doesn't affect the row any. And then I do normal stuff. So PhiTrigger does have the option of keeping Alex here. There was a game that I played where I decided to just do super inefficient actions. Something like, if I were to play this turn, I'd probably increase pop twice and build 2 steps of the Roman roads so that I can use as many civil actions that are just focused on my development as possible. But instead, he does decide to use Alex's conquest ability and take irrigation here. So he didn't need to do Alex right away since he didn't increase population or anything. Maybe he didn't have a card he wanted to seed this turn and wants to seed it next turn, but I think that I could have been kind of in a small bind if he just left the Alex trigger there. Anyways, going to Mushan's turn, he does resign now. So now it really is a 2-player game. And if you know me, I have very, very, very limited experience with 2 players, and I'm feeling a little out of my comfort zone. The lower the player count goes, I feel like the worse I am. And yeah, so I'm not feeling too confident actually going into this. Going into my turn, I see that PhiTrigger, he wants to replace a leader. Isabella's on the row. And although I don't really think of her as like a super great leader, there's also cartography here and having inhabited territory. I think that I could just lean on colonization a little bit. Also, the benefit of denying a leader for PhiTrigger for at least a couple more turns. There wasn't any leader that came up here. I decided to go for her. Not 100% sure how I feel about it in retrospect, but I do take her. But my biggest problem is that I probably shouldn't have elected her, actually. Boudica does effectively the same thing, but I have a choice. So I pretty much have no reason to do that. I guess there's a possibility where PhiTrigger gets a warrior, and I can't use Boudica's military action or military resource ability. So there is that, but I think in general, seeing as he doesn't have any free population for a free warrior event, I shouldn't worry about that so much, because if he has anything, it's not likely that he's going to spend some actions increasing pop just to build a warrior in that line. There's so many things that he can do with his resources instead, i.e. building Roman roads or going for irrigation. Anyways. Oh, sorry. Anyways, PhiTrigger seeds, flips Doman across, and does just finish the Roman roads. So, gonna stick with the plan that I had with colonization. This doesn't mean I need to put cards in the deck, so I try to fish it out. I put in this border conflicts, but should be a little bit wary since there's Nostradamus, Con, maybe Barbarossa, possibilities of getting strong really quickly. But I think with the extra strength from cartography, I do have Colosseum as well. It's possible that I could be stronger. So I seed it. It is kind of interesting that there's still packs in this game, which is kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is. So finish Colosseum. I want to draw as many cards as possible. Don't need to develop the cartography yet, and also it's a really good target for civil life if it does pop up. Not getting the greatest draws, but we'll see. Dilemma planning, and PhiTrigger chooses to take civil life here and develops irrigation. Takes a Meji. Pretty strong in 2-player games. Then does build a warrior. So I don't know. He did this kind of stuff to get out of corruption. Meji takes a lot of resources away. But I'm not sure about building this Meji before upgrading here. In general. But I guess there's pretty few ways to get out of corruption once you decide to take a Meji here. But anyways, I do have to be worried a lot more about strength now. He does have extra strength bonus, and I'm not going to, besides cartography. And there's potentially Barbarossa on the row, so I refrain I have restraint and I don't see the call to arms. Use civil life for the cartography, and I just go for irrigation too. I could have built a warrior here so that if PhiTrigger seeds, I would still be stronger. So yeah, but I decided not to. I just want to go for my irrigation as much as possible. PhiTrigger seeds, so it's spelled in the settlement, finishes Himeji, so now he's stronger than me. Takes knights, and just uses actions to develop. Makes sense. Yeah, anyways, obviously worried about Nostradamus as a leader, so I'm still gonna not seed Call to Arms. I am now a little bit worried about the fact that PhiTrigger is stronger than me and has seeded. He seeded 3 of these. I seeded Border Conflicts, which is a strength event, and Inhabited Territory. So I kind of want to not allow him to seed while he's stronger so easily. So build some warriors. Take Engineering Genius. Don't really need most of these slow cards. Engineering Genius is, expensive at 2 civil actions, but it's also pretty easy to use later on. So yeah, and I end up throwing away the Call to Arms because I just don't feel like it's going to happen for me. Lux Nostradamus starts going for some irrigations. Builds a warrior, so he's stronger and not weaker. So I want to slow down the deck, prevent him from doing stuff with Nostradamus. I'm still worried about the deck a little bit, so I use a lot of H1 military actions to just upgrade here. He's definitely going to be able to keep up if he wants to, but at the very least, I don't have like a lot of production to develop right now. So I pretty much have nothing to do but put my resources in here. Upgrades, takes Code of Laws. So this is kind of an interesting 2-player game where there are 2 sets of Code of Laws, 2 sets of Monarchy. But after this age, everything will be normal again. Anyways, I do take Machu Picchu because I know the iron will eventually come. I did have the Engineering Genius, so it does become a little bit cheaper. This could still be wrong. Like I said, I'm not good at 2-player games, but I do know that an iron is guaranteed for me. Maybe the resource production is going to be really good. I'm still playing to the fact that I'm probably going to have a relatively big economy. Maybe if I get my production up high enough, I can grab Universitas also, get my science up a little bit, so I can get science without having to develop something with it. And my civil actions are going to be okay because I'll get the Code of Laws out next turn. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm hoping for. I know that I can play for either government since I have the Colosseum, but I also know that Roman Roads is probably better in a 2-player game than Colosseum, especially when he starts to get extra science. So yeah, at least I have pretty decent resource production even without the irons being built, but I know that's not completely necessary. I know that there's a lot of resources that come in the form of yellow cards, but I still go with the Machu Picchu because I think that I'm just pretty well set up for it. That's all. All right, PhiTrigger goes for knights, so he's going to be stronger and not weaker, or he's going to be not weaker again. Increases his production and uses all of his first H2 military actions, which is definitely fine. It's possible that the draws are not as important. It's important to note that I have Rebellion, more happy faces than PhiTrigger, but this deck hasn't moved since since it filled, so I don't really want to seed into it still as the weakest. So if there are strength events in there, I don't really want to force them out that quickly. But I do build another swordsman here just so that I do want to try and seed this rebellion in. And at the very least, if PhiTrigger doesn't get stronger this turn, I can at least seed as the strongest next turn. Anyways, PhiTrigger seeds and flips my border conflicts, which I'm the strongest and the weakest, which is kind of funny. But there are certain plays that I can do that don't really affect this too much. In fact, if I disbanded a bronze, it's like I gained an extra resource, but it costs an action. But anyways, PhiTrigger takes the Universitas, and we'll get his science production up pretty quickly since he'll have 10 resources next turn. I do know that strategy is an important card, but obviously it's very expensive at 3 civil actions. I'm just going to play mostly from this part of the row, especially with only 5 civil actions. I am not weaker, or I am stronger and not weaker, so I put in this wealthy territory first. I do have some colonization. I don't need to put in the rebellion yet. It's still going to be a very long time, and it does kind of make sense to put H2 cards in this deck. So I take a scientific method. I disbanded a lab, so I basically don't lose any actions or resources at all with this, without border conflicts. I really need the science in general. If I go for iron first, it's going to be forever until I can build this lab. So I start with the lab first, 5 resource production already. I know that I really, really, really want scientific methods because of Newton, because of Gates, because of Einstein, and Jobs and Meyer as well. So I just think that this is a super key card, and just better to start building on it now than later. And then even though I know that I have colonies in the deck, I still discard one colonization card. Draw another developed territory. I do have the colonization advantage, but I do have more military actions too, but I did leave the strategy here, and that could be very crucial. So PhiTrigger seeds, flips cultural influence, goes for the strategy, so now he's stronger. He's going to be strongest and not weakest. He does delay his Universitas a little bit. Maybe he's really pushing for one of his strength events here, so he's definitely not going to get affected. But it's possible that you want to just go for the Code of Laws first, get more civil actions, increase your economy with it a little bit more. But definitely probably still want to take this strategy, of course. At the very least, it took most of his actions just to do that, and he has some corruption this turn. I see the rebellion. There was like a couple turns where PhiTrigger decided to not get to the point where there was a couple turns where he decided just to stay at 12. So I was thinking maybe there wasn't too much strength in the deck. Still had my inhabited here, so did try to win this when it was my advantage also. But you can see that PhiTrigger wins this because I only had the one card and I didn't want to bid that much. So he does bid, a medieval army and one card, and it's kind of unfortunate, but it's also fine. It's a little bit on the expensive side. So, and then I know that the rebellion's at the top of the somewhere in the first half of the deck, and it could really affect his turn. So it might also prevent PhiTrigger from wanting to seed after this deck has been flipped. But yeah, anyways, he's also weaker now, so he does not seed. Goes for Nobel, gets stronger. Goes for Code of Laws, upgrades the farm, grabs Revolutionary Idea. Still doesn't finish the Universitas, so it's been very, very delayed at this point. But this Revolutionary Idea is probably very, very important. Anyways, I still seed. Going for this developed, knowing that it might prevent PhiTrigger from seeding into this deck, seeing as Rebellion's in one of these 3 cards. Just hoping that it's not a strength event, but it's uncertain borders. And it actually doesn't affect me too much at this point. Have my happiness solution out. So actually it's not that big of a loss anymore, to be honest. Anyways, I finally have enough science, so I go for an iron upgrade. Get some more science production because this is even more important than resources. And I already have my tactics, so I don't really need to get these cavalrymen or anything. And I know that the rebellion's possibly in the deck, so I don't really want to increase population anymore. So I take the reserves and the efficient upgrade. If I knew for a fact that rebellion wasn't here, I'd probably increase pop instead, taking these reserves. But I just didn't have anything else to do at this moment. No reason to upgrade because I could still win possible colonies with fewer resources, so I just leave those there. And yeah. Anyways, PhiTrigger seeds, flips rebellion, so he did get punished for aggressively seeding a little bit, and he finally finishes Universitas. I think it's possible if he didn't have rebellion, he would have taken this republic here. So it really, really paid off for him to lose some civil actions there. But now he leaves republic on 1 for me. First I seed, and um, I win this. Vast territory, which I didn't seed relatively cheaply. That was pretty nice. It only cost me a warrior. So now losing that uncertain borders doesn't feel so bad. I still have 2 extra yellow tokens. PhiTrigger has 3 extra, but yeah, still not feeling bad. Happiness is good, and I feel like I feel like I'm actually in a really good spot here because I have the right buildings. If PhiTrigger had his scientific method set up or something, I'd feel a little bit worse about this game, but I feel like I'm in the right direction for my leaders. I'm also going to get a government, and it might be a while for PhiTrigger to get some. But yeah, I'm like pretty happy with this where I am in this game. And then if there are strength events, I do want to play around them, and I start going for some defensive armies. Yep. And at this point, I've drawn a lot of wars, but and I think that they could be important. War over technology could really affect the strategy, but no, it's really hard to war. With only Republic, 3 military actions, so not really too hopeful about that. Maybe if I want to lean into it more, I could have gone Napoleon, but I think Newton just works really, really well with the overall game plan of the game. I should note that PhiTrigger is creeping up a little bit ahead of me in culture, but it's not like a big gap or anything. It'll be a little bit worse once Age 3 comes because of Roman roads switching to culture, but I still feel like I'm in a relatively good position here. Anyways, both Con 1 and cannons come up, and this is kind of the result of putting clearly PhiTrigger put in strength events in this deck. He had to make a choice between which one he wanted, and he went for the cannons here. So you can really tell that he had some strength events and then doesn't want to lose. Anyways, obviously I'm not going to seed into this, but not that I had any anyways. But I finish another army. I take the Kanmon here. This isn't actually a denial pick. It's because I'd much rather have Kanmon out instead of Republic. I want 5 military actions at least. Sorry, I definitely want more military actions. I have really good action economy with Newton anyways, and the military actions are what's going to get me. So I just take the Kanmon here. It's not a denial. I plan on going for it next turn. And take the wave so I can help do do a little bit more in terms of pressuring that strength. I still have a lot of food left over, can still build more armies, and we know that PhiTrigger is not going to see it as the weakest. All right. Anyways, going into Age 3, if we take a small snapshot, we can see that PhiTrigger definitely has a little bit of a culture lead and culture production lead, but I'm a little bit ahead in terms of science, resources, and food, all there. I also have a benefit of being able to take wonders for a little bit cheaper, and the fact that I have more governments in game, or more access to civil actions because I have my governments in hand already, so I don't need to reach for them or anything. So although my culture is a little bit behind, I feel like it's definitely within reach. I have a lot of access to my population since my population is quite happy already. I know that PhiTrigger definitely needs to have a happiness solution this turn, and part of the reason that I played my last turn the way it was is that I left both these happiness solutions on 2 civil actions, so he has to spend most of it just doing that. Anyways, PhiTrigger goes for team sports here, deal with happiness, and then completes an army again as well. Once again, getting a little bit stronger here. Here I go for the constitutional monarchy, play the wave, build some more units. Part of the reason that I want 5 civil action or military actions so I can keep getting stronger and drawing cards. Now I have a lot of population. I do need to switch to culture at some point. It's nice that I already have like the buildings kind of set for the right leaders if I take this opera. And I think that this is going to be one of the ways that I start clawing my way into this game. So I take the opera, frugality, breakthrough, and organized religion. Organized religion because the possibility of both jobs and Einstein, so it's a very, very cheap tech in order to develop. And PhiTrigger, once again, does not seed. Takes the civil service for 3. And really, really wanted to get out of his issues for civil actions, and then completes another army in order to be the strongest. It wasn't until this point that I really took a good look at the Age 1 military deck, thinking I really need to think about what strength events there could be. Because it's been a long time since anybody's seeded, and I kind of wanted to start putting some cards in just for the culture gain. So yeah, I really decided that no strength event was very bad in this case. I knew that there wasn't actually calls to arms or anything, couldn't lose civil actions. Maybe crusades would be bad, but I decided if it was a strength event, there wasn't that much that could actually happen. I can disband stuff that I don't really care about too much. And what I decide to do is that I do seed Iconoclasm in, because I planned on switching leaders here. There's a lot of good ones in the row. I could go for any one of my choice, basically, and PhiTrigger is basically not set up for any one of them except for maybe Mandela. And here I decided to go for Einstein. I think that I kind of have tech set up for it. I have a decent bank of science. I have a lot of access. I have 15 science this turn anyways. So yeah, that's what I do. I start going for Einstein, build some operas, and take some cards and techs. And this is where I start to equalize my culture production. I do leave myself vulnerable to an aggression if PhiTrigger sacks, but I decided that I only revealed 1 H2 defense card, and I've always had 3 military actions, so it seems like it'd be very likely for me to defend. Also, I do leave the option open for PhiTrigger to start seeding, and these colonies are mine and stuff, so since we both played around strength for so long, maybe he thinks that these are also strength events that he can benefit from, but I technically have the advantage on the colonies that are there. But anyways, I do basically think that I'm executing a plan to start getting culture, and even though I'm just a little bit behind, I feel like Einstein is like the leader to help me catch up. Didn't want to go for Marlene because her bonus is basically smaller. I already have a lot of happiness set, so I didn't think that she would be very necessary. Don't really need her. I could have used her her army bonus, but I decided just to take the risk at this point. And then Gates, I think, even though I'm kind of set for him, I think that just having the culture production from Einstein would be good enough. So I am vulnerable here if PhiTrigger sacks, but I just decide to say, you know what, it's really, really unlikely that's going to happen. And he does actually seed. And flips to develop. He wins this. I realize I have the advantage, but I didn't decide not to bid too much for it. I only put like a cannon and 1 card. I think I probably should have bid 2 higher, thinking that this might be really important for him. Basically, I thought that he would bid a cannon, 1 card, and I thought the breakpoint would be another card, but I kind of forget that he has these warriors here, so I feel like I should have bid at least 2 higher, so that he would either have to pay 2 cards or throw away some more of his warriors instead, or throw away a whole army if he wants this. And the big reason that this is important is because this 5 science gives him his communism, so I know that he really, really wants it this turn. But I also felt like he wouldn't want to throw away a whole army because he doesn't have the resources to rebuild. So So I'm not 100% sure if I bid enough, but I do kind of feel like that I should probably have, seeing as how much he really wanted to get a government. So he sends basically what I thought he would. Kind of forgot about the warriors, like I said. Goes for communism, so now he has a very big civil action and military action bank. Rebuilds that cannon to be stronger, takes the Rev idea and the engineering genius, and just plays the Rev idea. So it's very possible that some of his actions might have wanted to be multimedia, um, but I do have Einstein, so multimedia doesn't really work for him that well. Maybe he wants to go for movies, and maybe he wanted to go for, maybe it's possible he wanted to take Marlene so he can go for movies more easily. Maybe not more easily, but would actually have a payoff to it, because after you look at these leaders, the only ones left are Jobs, Meyer, and Gandhi, and it's a pretty difficult to actually use Meyer and Jobs after he loses Nobel, since he'll only have +4 science, would need to upgrade to computers. So if he passes on Marlene, the only leader that he's really looking at is Gandhi here. Well, here I had a couple options. I decided to just, well, clearly you see that I decided to go for the Red Cross here. I had the mechanized agriculture so I can increase my food production, have a little bit of reserves as well. And yeah, you see that I decided to do it. I'm not going to get all the steps or anything. PhiTrigger has enough food for to make one step, but I think it's good enough. There aren't that many wonders that are very strong anyways. If I pass up Hollywood, then it would be a. If I pass up Hollywood and fast food chains, we'd both be fighting for. If we pass up Hollywood and Red Cross, then we'd both be fighting for fast food chains. And I decided that, getting 24 versus 6 plus the 4 colonies that are out, the 3 colonies that are out, 4 being right here, would be pretty good in itself. I wouldn't need to spend my resources on Wonder. I can actually just spend it on operas later instead. So I did want to take this military buildup as well, leaving myself in a position where I can definitely defend a war. I know that PhiTrigger doesn't have a lot of resources here, but I just didn't want to. I didn't want to leave him a lot, and I definitely wanted to take a lot here. So take some corruption. I feel like I'm fairly unwarrable with this military buildup and patriotism. So I start to feel pretty safe. My culture is, still a little bit behind, but my production's, artificially higher. I have a wonder in the works. I'm feeling pretty good, actually, at this point. You can also see that I didn't see the impact of progress here because PhiTrigger definitely beating me in that. In order for me to catch up, I would need to get at least one of the other blue techs, either military theory or engineering, and not have PhiTrigger have one of those blue techs also, or not have engineering especially. So, yeah, definitely feeling pretty okay about my spot, but this is still a very tense game. PhiTrigger is probably going to be the one who gets fast food chains. Neither of us have an engineering tech, so it's really hard for us to build wonders. I'm already looking at the fact that it's going to take 5 actions to build 4 steps, and that kind of sucks, but yeah, we'll see. Anyways, PhiTrigger seeds, flips wealthy territory, wins it for quite a lot. I bid a lot more on this one, seeing as the resources will be very important for these fast food chains. And at this point, he sends a whole army. So obviously feeling super safe after he does that, now that he doesn't have enough resources or the population for it. He also feels very pressured by the fact that my culture is going up. So here he takes fast food chains, goes for movies, doesn't even build a step on my Red Cross because he just didn't really have the actions for it. He could have disbanded this, maybe built a step that way, but it doesn't really matter since he's technically only going to get 1 step anyways. So, going to my turn, I finally see this impact of progress as a military theory here. The engineering is still a gamble, but I don't have anything else to seed. This is basically neutral. I get 1 extra point over him. if I seed it, so I just decide to. And I flip refugees, which was extremely nice timing after the colony. So I actually increased population here. I know that PhiTrigger will still only get the one step. I didn't have enough food anyways. Had frugality, so it doesn't cost as much as it looks, but I still do it this way. And then I actually just build some theaters here, knowing that he can't really war me anymore with only 13 resources. If I have military buildup patriotism, that's just too much for him to handle. Take some techs for Einstein, and go for the military theory because impact of progress. And take the Rev idea because I kind of math it out and I really need it to. I really need this for one more technology. Going into this turn, we are very, very tight in culture. I still feel like I've been catching up every single turn a little bit. I just drew impact of balance, which is really, really good for me. Impact of technology is like slightly good for me. I pretty much figure that I can get one more technology out over him. So I know that my impacts are going to be pretty good, but there are some impacts that could be potentially good for PhiTrigger. So I'm not completely out of the woods yet, but I'm definitely feeling like I'm in a pretty good spot. We both have wonders that'll give us about the same amount. He spent a lot of units on colonies, so he doesn't actually have that big of a fast food chain. It's only like 20 at the moment or something around that. And the fact that he has to spend resources on his wonder makes his overall culture production relatively low. Anyways, going into PhiTrigger's turn, this is definitely very likely to be the penultimate turn. With only 9 cards in the deck, it's pretty easy for the HTN tier. So what PhiTrigger does is that first he wins National Pride, builds a stage on my Red Cross finally, so he forces me to finish Red Cross next turn if I don't want to give him more stages. Takes Endowment because he is forcing me to build Red Cross first, meaning that I'm going to have more points than him at the start of his turn. Goes for Gandhi, and then builds one more movies. I actually kind of question him going for Gandhi here. It doesn't really make sense. I am Einstein. I have the ability to go for a Nobel Prize this turn and very likely a Nobel Prize next turn. So this Nobel Prize, giving me in this Nobel Prize seems like a big mistake. 8 more. That's potentially 8 more points for him. Maybe he gets. I don't think it's possible for him to get a Nobel Prize himself. He only has access to 15 science. So it does seem like this switch is probably incorrect. It's possible that he's doing this because he's really worried about his civil actions next turn. So that seems relatively understandable since it takes him at least 6 actions to play Endowment, Reserves, and then finish this wonder. And then 2 more actions to take and develop a technology if he wants to play around Impact of Tech. And then he only has an extra space for 1 more civil action after that. So I don't think he wanted to feel so confined. Maybe he needs to play this Rev idea in order to take a tech that costs more than a tech that costs more than 9. But yeah, this Nobel Prize definitely favors me over him. Anyways, I see Impact of Balance here. Flips Iconoclasm that I put in forever ago, which is really good because it would be very, very bad, I think, on my turn if Iconoclasm flipped in Age 4. My culture potential is much higher than his. Anyways, play the Organized Religion first since I need to get cards out of hand. Take the Engineering for Impact of Progress. Finish my Red Cross. And then I don't have much else to do, and I decide to build a lab here, and part of the reason is because of Impact of Balance. I think that I can maybe set up for a balance of 10. I had initially a balance of 8 from the resources, but it looks like I can push it up to 10 the way that I have it set up, assuming that I'm going to see Impact of Technology. Anyways, PhiTrigger basically does all the actions that he's forced to. First he seeds, flips Population of Science, which was one of his seeds. Extremely good for me. And Then he does all the actions that he's forced to, plays around impact attack a little bit, and finishes his turn. It's possible that you want to increase population here as your last action, but I guess it's pretty irrelevant. Anyways, I see impact of variety here. You can see that my variety, instead of impact attack, my variety can be almost perfect, and I play in a way that variety is like really, really big for me instead of going for impact attack. So, impact colonies flips. Kind of unfortunate. I seeded most of these colonies. Actually, this is really funny because PhiTrigger won all the colonies that I seeded, and I won the colony that he seeded. So I thought that was kind of amusing. Anyways, play 2 techs, and then I actually, like I said, play in a way where I increase my variety the most. This does mean that I can't get my balance to 10, but I do get it to 9 instead. Harmony is also notably very high. Raise my industry, agriculture, all my impacts are very good. There's only 4 impacts in here instead of 5. 3 of them are mine, being balance, variety, and progress. So I know that I have a really big lead in the deck. And if we look after my production, I have a slight lead. There's just no one single impact in which PhiTrigger can catch up here. So I'm feeling very confident going into this impact evaluation. My balance is enormous. And then my variety is also enormous. And then the impact that PhiTrigger seeded was culture. Couldn't catch up into that. And then progress is a little bit better for me than him. And I am very, very relieved to have won this 2-player game since I have such little experience with it. It felt very tense throughout the entire game for me. There were times where I feel like I was definitely executing the plan that I wanted to. I just wasn't sure that that plan would come into fruition or be good enough, especially because age 3 is a lot shorter in 2-player games than a lot of other ones. So I just wasn't sure if I was setting up my game plan to be the right one. I think it helped that PhiTrigger went for a leader like Nobel, which is not a culture generator. There were also a lot of turns in which he didn't see it as Nostradamus because we were kind of fighting for strength, which I think is actually played a lot into my benefit since Isabella actually produces something, and all Nostradamus does is provide a little bit of strength if you're not seeding. So maybe that strength fight really helped me out, and it also forced him to go into Nobel because he wanted to keep doing strength events. But in any case, I feel like this was a very hard-fought game, and I'm just really glad to have won it. Now you can see the results of all 4 games that we've completed at this point. And the standings are as follows. You can see that I'm ahead, but I have the most games played. I actually finished all my 3-player games first, so I have a little bit more points to gain in my 4-player games, with 2 wins and 1 second. Herostraphio still very big, still has that same point count across. Everybody has the same point count. The only thing that changed was PhiTrigger, him getting 2 points and now tied with MM34NN. And we know that Mushan is going to be forced to relegate, so it's too early to make any calls. But at this point, Herostraphio and Vivi are the higher contenders. PhiTrigger and MM34NN and Pascaltopia are on the lower end. But there's so few games played. There's so much left to be done. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.